I was super allergic to them, though.
What, rabbits?
Oh,
So you're super allergic to rabbits?
hey,
I am
Jen.
super allergic to rabbits. Hello, Steven.
What's up,
Hello.
Steven?
Hey, hey, Erika.
Hey.
I was just telling Erica, I just moved into a new home and everything.
It's
is
blurry. It's a blurry place, huh?
So you can't see his unmade bed in the background.
It's
You
like
know,
there's a spot camera on you. Like,
Yeah.
Joe Lansdale and I were talking, and he said that you're one of his best friends, and
Mhm.
I get it, man. You two are fucking funny. When are you two writing a book together?
We've talked about it before. We just never got around to it, man. To writing a story or something,
That'd be
anyways.
sweet. Obviously goes for you too, Erica. If there's anything brought up that you guys want cut, let me know. No questions asked. It is cut.
Or
That's
taking off through my tooth.
You have to wear those and answer every question with those in. So it's just 45 minutes of unintelligible garble.
I just need elf ears if I'm going to outdo you, Stephen. Just like a giant pair of Vulcan.
That could be
Yeah.
That'll be a
That'd be
tall.
exceptional for audio listeners, too, who just have no idea why they can't understand a damn word you say.
Welcome to Dead Headspace. I'm your host, Patrick R. McDonough. Before I introduce Brennan, I'm just going to say Candace, unfortunately, couldn't be here today. She'll be here next week. Reason being, she contracted COVID. She specifically told me that if she was just sick, she'd be here. So I just wanted to say, Stephen, she was super excited to talk to you. Hopefully there's a next time, and she'll definitely be a part of that.
Cool.
You guys know, listeners, you guys know my friend Brennan LaFaro. Say hello, Brennan.
Hello, everybody.
And we got our guest host, Erika T. Wurth. Say hello, Erika.
Hello.
And for all our fellow horror nerds, this guy needs no introduction, but I'm going to introduce him anyways. Stephen Graham Jones, say hello.
Hello.
And we're just going to dive into what got you into horror. After he answers that, Brennan or Erika, take the lead.
What got me into horror? Man, what got me into horror? What got me into horror? The first horror novel I ever read was Whitley Strieber's Wolfen, and I was probably 11 or 12. I'm not sure about that. And I really feel like everything I write, I'm trying to rewrite Wolfen. There's those chapters that are from the grandfather wolf's point of view and his voice, and those just got into my writer DNA forever and ever. And also, right around that same time, I saw my first horror movie, which was The Howling, and that's also deep in my DNA. And so it's no surprise that I finally worked up the nerve to do Mongrels,
I was going to say, I was sensing a theme there.
Yeah, for sure, man.
That's interesting. Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
No, I was just going to say that's really interesting because this is, if my count's anywhere near right, something around episode 210 that we've recorded. And you get a lot of, I read Stephen King, I read Dean Koontz, I read this person, that person. Nobody's ever mentioned Whitley Strieber before. I'm very curious what drew you to that book.
I don't have the paperback here. I've got it somewhere, but it was the cover, man. It was a mass market cover that is almost all black, but it's got those two wolf eyes like slanting down, and you can see the barest suggestion of the muzzle or something. And man, I was hooked. I could not put that book. I couldn't have not read that book, I think. And I have no idea where I got it because I'm not saying like I didn't live in a household where books were out of bounds or anything, but we didn't have them around either, so I don't know why in the world I stumbled onto this book.
But then, going back to that theme, what do you think? What do you think it is about werewolves that really just kind of draws you in?
I think it was that age for me. When you're 11, 12, 13, you're changing and you realize you're changing. And I didn't really have the guidance to tell me what I might be changing into. So I thought maybe it's elective, And so I started casting about. And in West Texas, being a vampire is instant death because there's no shade, So a werewolf, I could run around and eat rabbits and jump fences and have fun all the time. And so, of course, I want to be a werewolf. And nobody wants to be a mummy, and mermaid. You wouldn't last 10 minutes being a mermaid in West Texas. So of all the creatures, werewolf was pretty much all I could do.
I did not expect process of elimination to be part of that answer, but brilliant. Erika, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, I always love Steven's answers because like they're the cool answers, you know. Whereas I'm like, all I remember is that I have this extremely distinct memory. I went into um like the library and I was like telling the librarian, I just want something about a girl and a ghost. I just remember that very distinctly, you know. But you know, otherwise, I'm not even sure what got me into it. My answer would otherwise be Stephen King. But I think what
Mm.
I'm always interested in is the final girl thing, right? Because there's so much debate about this. Like Grady does it, you do it. I remember Cynthia Pelayo saying, "Well, you know, why does it have to be a final girl? Could be a final
Mhm.
guy,
Mhm.
or couldn't the murderer be a woman?" I think those are all legitimate questions. But
Mhm.
I think what I'm curious about is what about the final girl kind of compels you, Stephen, or at least in this like you know
Yeah.
trilogy?
I think final girls are just the best possible model for us for how to push back against the bullies in our lives, you know, be it somebody in a parking garage who is shadowing us, be it a boss we don't like, be it a boyfriend, girlfriend, you know, that and we're in a relationship with. All through all of our interactions in the world, there's always going to be bullies. You know, that's what Jason Voorhees is. That's what Michael Myers is. That's what Freddy Krueger is. They try to exert their power over you and terrorize you. And final girls get terrorized, they get chased, they scream, they fall down when they run away, all those things. But there comes a point where they're like, enough is enough. And they turn around and they fight and they transform into their pure selves, you know? And I think if we can identify enough with their story, we can understand that we have that inside ourselves as well. And we can also push back and try to make things better.
I love that actually. I kind of would like a scenario where it's not metaphoric. I would actually like to be able to transform into a werewolf. Just
Oh, man.
actually that and be like, "Rrr," and then
Yeah.
it just then they would be quiet then, you know.
Oh,
But
man.
I
Yeah.
love that
Yeah.
because a lot of people see it as like the final girl's a victim and you know, we're putting
Mhm.
women in this victim space. But I actually think you're right. I feel that you and Grady Hendrix are doing it
Mhm.
in a way that I can celebrate. Like
Mhm.
you know, because women do end up cornered, like a lot of us, right? And so
Mhm.
they do fight back and they do
Yeah.
survive and they do survive from, you know, their physical skills, their mental skills. So yeah, I like
Yeah.
that a lot.
Yeah, and of course, like you were saying, Final Girl is more of a character slot than like a gender identity or something, because you have a lot of Final Boys too. I mean, they're Final Girls, but they're boys, and it doesn't matter, you know. I think the reason we see a lot more women being Final Girls than we do men being Final Girls is what's that? There's that movie from I want to say '83 by Lamberto Bava, Blade in the Dark. I think it's called Blade in the Dark. It's about a musician who goes to a remote estate, probably in Italy, I'm not sure, to work on a score or something. And of course he's menaced, you know, every waking hour by some killer who's killing gardeners and doing all kinds of stuff. And finally he confronts that killer. The killer is a woman. And and it turns out when she's unmasked and they're in the living room, I think, he like outsizes her by I don't know 8 inches or something, and she comes at him and he just like knocks her down, you know. And that that like disparity, I guess, in just I don't know size, strength, something like that, is why I think most final girls are women, because when they do that thing where they stop, turn around, pick up the machete, and go after the killer in the mask, then they're going to get something that outsizes them, outmuscles them, outmeans them, and all just is more of a killer than they are. But that doesn't matter. They're going to come at them anyways, you know. And I'm not saying that every story with the final boy is broken by any means, but it just presents a different set of like story problems that you have to navigate around and make work, you know. Um, but I mean, I don't mean to say that women are less good fighters or anything like that. You know, I don't. But in that Blade in the Dark, the final girl, the guy in the final girl role, does actually outsize his attacker, his bully, his slasher. You know, and it was a weirdness. You never see that. Like Jason is never shorter than whoever he's killing. You know.
He's not
Oh,
like Andre the Giant with a machete.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Especially if it's Rob Zombie's Michael Myers, you know.
Yeah, I like Rob Zombie.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That dude's from Haverhill originally.
Really?
Shout out to our home state, Brennan.
Oh man.
Yeah, his parents still lived. Well, actually, that was said to me very long time ago. Shit, time flies. I don't know
They
for
may have
sure.
moved. Who knows?
They might have. So I got a question.
Rob Zombie puts on a good show too. I saw him in concert a few
I
years
bet.
ago. He's really good, man.
Yeah, he's just I like his new shit. I like his old shit. He just has a different style. The
Yeah.
Pink Floyd of heavy metal. I said it. Where can, where can people, if at all possible, buy your shirt? And for listeners,
This one?
yeah,
Yeah.
this is Jay
Ideally,
Daniels.
ideally from Greg Green, and I think he sells them through Etsy. And the URL is jadeshirt.com, but I think he just had to repurchase a certificate or something for that. So I'm not certain at the moment we're recording this if that URL, that domain name is live. A few days ago, it wasn't live, but yeah, you know how the shirt bots are. Whenever a shirt is posted and starts selling, then all the bots replicate it all across the internet. You can buy it anywhere. So that's kind of how the shirt is now. But Greg Green, and he's the one who originated the idea, and a guy named Ragosta, is it Jason Ragosta? He did the art, and so I mean, hopefully everybody buys from him, such that the money goes to the right place, you know?
Yeah, I love that shirt. Definitely fits the aesthetic that you're trying to create.
Yeah.
Before we dive into anything else for Jay Daniels, Daniel Kraus, we talked to him last week. He specifically said to us to tell you hi, and he let us know that you were one of the first. Actually, he said the first to read Whale Fall.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask you to tell us about the story, but how to make you feel, and how are you the first to read it, man? That's awesome.
He just needed he just I don't know why I was first. I don't know. I mean, maybe I was just maybe he sent it to 50 people and I just happened to be the first who read it. You know, I don't even know for sure. I never asked him, but no, that novel blows me away. Whalefall. I mean, number one, the research, but no, really, tell you the truth, the research is probably like number three. Number one, the story. You know how much I engage and invest with this character, with his survival and his kind of emotional struggles. You know, his processing through the grief of his father, losing his father, and still, as much as I loved all that, once I got to the ending and what happens at the ending, that just kind of solidified for me that this is an amazing novel, that he pulled it off, you know, because there's so many wrong ways to end that particular type of story. And Daniel, he fell into none of those traps. He found the elegant way out, you know, not like literally out of the whale's stomach. He found the elegant way out of the story, you know.
Absolutely. Brendan, I feel like you got something to say.
Yeah, first of all, you're right on. But jumping back to Jade Daniels and the trilogy, we've been talking for like 10 minutes and you've already demonstrated this encyclopedic knowledge of slasher stuff. And
just like
the
Jade.
books are just, well, that's where I'm going with this, is the books are just dripping with all these Easter eggs and just everything that's like trapped inside that head. So I'm curious, when you're writing these, what kind of consideration do you put into I guess balancing references and Easter eggs with, telling the coherent story, and how that relates to just kind of Jade's mastery of the genre?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, Jade, she found Bay of Blood in that bargain bin when she was in junior high. And I'm so lucky that she found a proto slasher, because if she would have found a tennis racket, then I'd be screwed, because I don't know nothing about tennis, So I'm really happy that what she's into is what I'm into. There's I say happy like it's luck. There's probably a little shaping going on, but well, I guess the trick with all the, like, I don't know, title drops and trivia and just all that kind of slasher key stuff is that yes, I want to put it in there for sure, because that's Jade's compulsion, it's her fascination, it's her lens by which she makes sense of the world. But also, I don't want to rig it such that if you don't get this little bit of trivia, this in joke, whatever, that you're not let into the cool kids club. That's the wrong way to build a story, I think. So that's the hard balancing act with all that. And every once in a while I do have to like lean into a bit of trivia for like a dramatic turn in a scene. And when I have to do that, I try to set it up earlier, such that even if the reader has never seen Final Exam or Night School, I have already fed them what they need to know to understand this dramatic turn that's coming.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely. And you said balance, and that's absolutely it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. what is your opinion on Jaws as a slasher?
I don't know. I don't really agree that it's a slasher. Jade completely is invested in that it's a slasher. But I love Jaws. I don't mean to take anything away from Jaws, but is it a slasher? I just read another article for Fangoria for that Slasher Nation I do, talking about like the minimum threshold for something to be a slasher. And what I realized through writing this little, I don't know if you call it an essay, I guess it's a column, that's what it is that it all hinges on the reveal, the reveal of the killer's motivations. And in Jaws, there is no reveal of this shark's motivations. Although I do have a little article out there. Where did it run? I don't remember where it ran, maybe Lit Reactor or somewhere, talking about Jaws's motivations. So if that was ever dramatized, if anybody does a cut of the film where they sneak it in, then it could probably count as a slasher. And that piece I wrote, I suggested that that story that Quint tells about the Indianapolis going down and all those sharks coming and feeding on everybody, that famous monologue he delivers, that they were, of course, delivering the bombs, to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And back then, in the 40s, we probably didn't know about how to contain radiation as well as we do now, and we're still not perfect with it. I suspect that there was, when that ship foundered, that there was some radiation that leaked out into the water, and there was a whole lot of sharks in the water. And I suggest that maybe one of those sharks got irradiated, and it remembers Quint, and it comes and finds him over an Amity,
Dude, that's like a Chuck Palahniuk level study. He has a study. I just gotta tell you, because to me it's relatable. When we talked to him, he was, because we love Rosemary's Baby, so does he, and we were talking about that book, and he said that I believe Ira Levin's real message, because back what was it, the 50s, the 60s?
Rosemary's Baby, under the movie's late, like 68, right? So the book, I would guess the book was, I don't know when it was, I'd guess 65, but I don't even know.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
But he said it was, I'm gonna mess up the name. What is it?
Thalidomide.
Thalidomide? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Thalidomide.
Yeah. So he said, instead of, for listeners that didn't hear that episode, it's just a medicine that women would take. And what was it, for abortions?
I got the name. The rest is on you.
It was something like that. Instead of giving birth to the devil, that replaced the medicine that Ira Levin was masking it with. And that, all that to say is, you have this this studious way of looking at work, and you can tell by your writing too. You talk about Daniel's research. Well, I know you love it, so that doesn't change the fact that it's research. You put shit in there that not most people can write that. So that's all I wanted to say. It's interesting.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think really, I feel like I was trained to always look for the gossamer tendrils connecting everything, if that makes sense, and I feel like they're always there if you just look long enough. If you like part the curtains enough, then you can see that this actually comes from that, and this is meant to be that, and you can just follow it back to, you can Kevin Bacon everything, it seems like,
The Tremors joke. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. But really, a transformative moment for me was probably 95, 96, when VH1's pop-up video came around. Do you remember pop-up video?
I do.
I don't actually.
Yeah, like they play like a Spice Girls video, and they have these little, like, it looks like the messages that come up in your iPhone, like these little, and it says all these little trivia things behind the scenes that you would have no way of knowing if you didn't have that like layer of trivia on top of the video. And I inhaled every one of those, and a lot of them are on YouTube. I still watch them. They just make me intensely happy. And then not long after that, fell right into Infinite Jest with all those footnotes, which is like the deepest possible rabbit holes, and I read that I read Infinite Jest in the same 2 weeks I read Pynchon's Mason and Dixon, and it does rabbit holing in a completely different way. It's got mechanical invisible ducks and all kinds of crazy stuff. And I feel like that, and that's also the year Scream came out, 96. And you got Billy quoting Psycho and all this stuff, and quoting The Exorcist. And I feel like just all of that lodged in me in a way that left me never the same, if that makes sense.
Erika, jump in.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's interesting because I mean, I know it's one of these like academic words, but in some ways, right, you're talking about postmodernism. But what's interesting is that, and I always find this kind of compelling about Scream, and I don't know if it's the moment or it's just the writing. But if you're talking about David Foster Wallace, right, you can't call that guy an organic writer. And this, like,
Mm-hmm.
there was a interview I remember reading or listening to of his, and he was talking about his tennis coach. And his tennis coach kept being like, "You can't get the ball right because you got a bad head, kid." And he's like, "I'm like that with fiction. I can't just do the natural structured thing, right?" But
Mm-hmm.
then again, if you read his essays, I honestly think in some ways, like people like Roxane Gay are kind of, they owe him because he pioneered that research
Mm-hmm.
that you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about, plus, personal, and he blended it
Mm-hmm.
so seamlessly and in such a structured way. But
Mm-hmm.
Scream is extremely organic. It's fun, it's punchy, it's got the
Mm-hmm.
traditional Hollywood art, and yet it's
Yeah.
completely postmodern. So it's kind of interesting because I think a lot of people find like postmodern tactics, like you're talking about, or techniques really off putting. But for
Mm-hmm.
example, your books do that, and people are like, hell yes, I love
Mm-hmm.
Jade, I love the slasher, I'm totally into
Mm-hmm.
it. So I don't know. I don't know what, I guess the question is what makes it, I hate this word, but what makes it palatable or not? What
Mm-hmm.
makes somebody like, oh, this is fun to consume
Yeah.
versus, it's interrupting my, you know what I mean, my natural consumption of this thing.
Yeah. No. Yeah. That's a good question and a good way to ask it. To me, the if there is a like a secret, then it's a Stephen King secret, really. It's get the audience, get the reader engaged enough with the protagonist, invested enough in the outcome of their arc, that everything else is just muscle on a skeleton, but they fall in love with I don't know, Stu Redman from The Stand or whatever it is, and they believe in that character enough that everything that goes with that character they also love, because they don't push back against that stuff because that would be pushing back against the character. And in my, like, the first time I stumbled into a character like that for in my books that I've written is probably, let me think, probably Darren from Mongrels. He's like, a lot of people fell for Darren, and Darren he's fun. I can write Darrens in all my books, but I don't want to do that because you can't. If you can do something, you should not do it. You should do other things. I think you should work out all your muscles. But um um I don't know. To me, you luck into those characters. And when I say look into those characters, it's like you pick the right pieces from the people in your life and construct them into that character. Basically, that's what I do. Anyways, like Darren, I know that if you cut them into a pie chart, I can assign people in my life to each of those pieces of pie. And Jade is she has a lot less pie pieces, just as big of a pie, but she's got like two or three pie pieces, and I'm probably 40% of her.
Well, in a word, too, she's tremendously sympathetic because you're right. The
Mm,
Stephen King trick and the Stephen Graham Jones trick is,
mm,
creating a complex character, but, one
mm,
who like has emotional stuff going on that,
mm,
to be
mm,
right, is at stake, but also like
mm,
makes you feel sorry for them, makes you relate to them, And
mm,
so, yeah, those
mm,
are definitely, I think that makes a lot of sense.
mm. Yeah, it's tricky. It's Yeah, it's hard to ride that line because, of course, you can always set up a character to where everybody's going to feel sorry for them. Like John Wick, they killed his puppy. Of course, we're on his side. You can do those kind of tricks real easy. But I think the reader gets really jaded to that quickly. So you've got to kind of blindside them with it or ambush them with it in some way. I think. I don't know. I mean, I'll never have figured it out. What I always feel like with writing techniques, with like tricks that I learned to get across stories and novels, is that I have a cup, and I've been filling it with little tricks and techniques ever since I started writing. And but the trick is it can only hold so much, and there's like actually 15 cups worth of techniques and tricks. And so when I pour one trick in, something else splashes out. So I'm always having to relearn stuff. Like, I wish I could do some stuff like I did back in Leadfeather in 2007, but I can't write like that anymore. I can't write like The Bird Is Gone from 2003. I wish I could, but that stuff is splashed out of my cup, and I've got different tricks in my cup now. And to me, that's what a writing career is. It's just keeping your cup full and being satisfied with the fact that it's going to have different stuff in it from year to year, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And you know what I like about Jade? I know she's kind of evolved, but I guess what makes her not just like, like, oh, not, tick, we're sympathetic with her because of like what's happening in her home life. She's annoying. She's wonderfully annoying. First, like she's like, "Hey guys, I know I just bumped into you and you're strangers, but I'd like to tell you about these horror movies." And they're like, "Great." You're like, "You're surrounded by adult men, Jade. Maybe you should not do that." And really, you're just more like, then in the end, you're just annoyed with them, but you kind of like her anyway,
Yeah. You know, I think that scene you're talking about from early in My Heart is a Chainsaw. I was at a party when I was about 20 or 19 in Dallas at a apartment complex, and I was out in the parking lot, and some dude came up to me just randomly in the parking lot, and he was messed up on like 48 different chemicals, and I think this was like his third or fourth day awake, and he just started spewing all these facts on me, and I wasn't that fascinated, but I was compelled to listen at the same time, and I think that's where that scene comes from.
And that was probably my cousin. So
Now I got a question for you two, and Brennan, please jump in as well. I don't know what the answer is. I don't think anyone does. But if Wes Craven wasn't behind Scream, the first one, do you guys think that it would be this powerful for this song? Because I know that, like the Drew Barrymore chase scene, I know in the script it just said something as vague as Ghostface chases whatever the girl's name was, but that's where you add where Wes Craven adds his magic. So I'm wondering, I don't know what the fuck you're gonna say, Steven, but I feel like I'm gonna be like,
well, I don't want to, Erika. I don't want to cut you off. Do you have something? Or?
No, I think just gut instinct, no way. You know what I mean? It's the right, it's the structure, and the characters and the mask, but it's the writing that makes it.
Yeah, like for me, as far as directors go, there's never been anyone better in a tight hallway than Wes Craven. He can give you tension, like in that movie Red Eye, that thriller. He does tension so well on that plane. Every one of his films, the way he positions the camera towards tension is it's, I want to say it's instinctual, but of course he learned it over many tries and many failures. But the closest I've seen to having that ability with a camera is Lee Janiak. Actually, she has a really good knack for how to move when people are running, I guess, but yeah, like in the script for Scream 2, Kevin Williamson says Wes does some scary shit here. That's, and he lets Wes Craven go for 8 or 10 pages of a chase scene, and yeah, that kind of stuff is amazing. But no, I don't think Scream would have hit like it did had Wes Craven not been at the helm at all. And and a big part of that would have been because the slasher was like functionally dead in 96 or 95 when they were shooting anyways. And well, I say 95. It came out on Christmas Day, didn't it? In 96. I'm not sure the dates when they shot that. They could have been shooting into the spring of 96, I guess. But anyways, and I think that another director would have fallen into the trap of, we need to replicate the 80s slashers, the golden age slashers, and we need to do that formula again, just with higher production values. And all these TV actors that we've pulled together, and which is to say there probably would have been nudity every 14 minutes or something, like you see in the old stuff. But Wes Craven, like Nightmare on Elm Street, he never did that. In any of the Screams, he never did that. And I love that he was trying to, I don't know if he was trying to, but what I get is that he was graduating the slasher away from its exploitative roots, and I really appreciate that. And it makes the audience, I think, focus more on the story than like the cool visuals or I mean, there is gore in Scream, of course, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't think to me, it doesn't work without, I mean, you got to have Kevin Williamson first to write that in 3 days, staying up in Palm Springs.
Yeah, that's fucking crazy.
Yeah, I know, but you definitely need Wes Craven at the helm. And I think, didn't Kevin Williamson, he had actually adapted that Drew Barrymore sequence, the first 12 minutes, from a one-act play he had done in college, I think, if I remember correctly.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask one more question then. Do you guys want to end Steven's time here with Don't Fear the Reaper?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
So my question is, it's long-winded. Episode 204, it's called Rising Together. Paul Tremblay, John Langan, Sarah Langan, Victor Laval, Olivia Llewellyn, and Larry Barron. They mentioned you a lot, Stephen, and the whole point of that episode is for a group of people that rose up together in their career. And I just kind of want to hear what basically they were. It was I think like an hour and a half. So the whole time we were just talking about basically what you need to survive if you're not a short timer. So I'm wondering if you have anything to say about any of those people mentioned, or if you have any words about how important it is to have a strong, like a true friends support system.
No, it is really nice to have people to commiserate with, and really importantly, people to say, stay away from this editor, stay away from that magazine, or just to say, yeah, I submitted a cemetery dance 5 months ago too, and we're all waiting together for the acceptance or the rejection. But it's wonderful to have that, and that to me is kind of what conventions deliver to us, because they let us all hang out and talk after hours about that kind of stuff, and yeah, I think it's vital for sure. Yeah.
Nice. Brennan and Erika, whoever wants to, let's dive into Don't Fear the Reaper. And the reason what we're promoting specifically with Steven is Don't Fear the Reaper paperback version. This is the day of this episode's release, so it's September 26th, 2023. Brennan or Erika?
Erika, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I've asked about Jade, right? So Dark Mill South. He's kind of, it's perfect that you talked about Nightmare on Elm Street, because when I was a teenager in the 80s, and that was just what we watched. And even though in some ways it doesn't stand the test of time, there's something compelling about the narrative and the monster. But I think he's, Freddy's kind of witty and funny and awful and gross. But I want to say Dark Mill South is a bit more like Jason. He's kind of silent and terrifying and hulking. Yeah. And I think I asked you this before, but I think for the purposes of this podcast, I think it's relevant. What about that kind of monster scares you or compels you or just makes you want?
What scares me about those type of bullies is that you can't negotiate with them. If they don't speak, like Freddy, if you can get him talking, then maybe you can sneak away while he's waiting for a punchline to come. But Jason, you can, even that dude who was a boxer in which one was that? That was Manhattan. Yeah, Jason Takes Manhattan. That dude who was a boxer who could actually physically, it would seem, resist Jason. He doesn't even have a chance. He gets his head boxed off. You can't talk to Jason. All you can do is scream. And when you scream, I guess the purpose of screams, right? It kind of evolved in monkey societies where you alert the rest of the troop that there's danger. But in slashers, the scream generally serves to reduce you to a puddle of fear, just waiting to get macheted. And that's the response you had to these big hulking killers. That's why Michael Myers in Halloween Kills, in which he kind of is a Jason Voorhees type character, why he's able to take out that whole crew of firemen, because he just doesn't stop, and that's scary. I think Freddy would have a much harder time coming out of that flaming house in Halloween Kills, taking out that fire crew, because he'd be stopping to drop quips, and that would give people too much time.
I like that. So in other words, Jade and Dark Mill South are just great. Perverse companions, right? Because he's so unrelenting. I definitely wouldn't know anything about unrelenting bullies you can't reason with. That Jade gets this opportunity to really, kick ass and and really look good doing it. So I like that.
Yeah. But I'd never thought of that. That's cool. Jade is very verbal with all her slasher stuff, and Dark Mill South is very nonverbal. But that's right, they are kind of two sides of some sort of coin or something. A good pair.
Yeah.
Yin and yang.
Yeah.
Brandon, what are your thoughts, buddy?
So a two-part question. When you went to start on book two, I'm
Uh-huh.
curious, what kind of led you to do a little time jump, and on top of that, when you have a slasher sequel, you gotta balance it to pay homage to the first one and bring back
Uh-huh.
the people who dug the first one, but also give them something different. How did you kind of take that to task?
Yeah, you're totally right. You have to deliver the same but different. And there's also a big tonal challenge with book twos of trilogies. It's like start from Star Wars to Empire Strikes Back. That's the trick. Or Fellowship of the Ring to Two Towers. Those both work just the same to me. And the trick is like with Chainsaw was a slow burn until the end, until you get to the big massacre, and I knew that building Don't Fear the Reaper the same way was that was a build that couldn't surprise an audience who had already seen that. And so what I had to do with Don't Fear the Reaper is hit the ground running and drop a body every 10 or 12 pages and try to do it worse and worse every time. And because it was a book two, I had the luxury of doing that because Proof Rock was already built, the characters were already introduced, and I didn't have to slow down to say Proof Rock has been here since 1872 or whenever. And that was really nice. And but structurally, I had to also deliver those intercut essays, which like Jade had done the Slasher 101s. I had to do the same thing in Don't Fear the Reaper, and I do a similar thing in the third book too, because some things I think if you set up a pattern in book one, you are kind of locked in. If you break that pattern too much, the audience is going to call foul. And it's really fun. I love the challenge of coming up with different ways to do that. And but tonally, I had to, like in any novel, you want a sense of redemption or victory at the end of it, whether it's a book one, book 15, whatever. You want the dramatic line to be the problem of the dramatic line to be answered at the end of the book, but you want the narrative not to be complete yet because the narrative arcs across the whole trilogy. So I had to find a way to um, pit Jade and Dark Mill South and the various antagonists all against each other, but leave the like close off the dramatic line enough to be satisfying for a novel, but let the narrative still be on its arc to book three. And yeah, that was tricky. And it was especially tricky for a writer like me because I had no idea where I was going. I was probably 2/3 into the book before I was like, I think this person will be the killer because I don't know, I don't think about that kind of stuff. But I take as my lead Kevin Williamson again because I was reading an interview somewhere where he says when he was writing Scream, the first draft, he realized maybe I'll probably get the number wrong, maybe halfway through it, that wait, Billy couldn't have been there killing this person because he was in jail or something like that. And he said, do I go back and fix that? Or is there another patch I can do? And there was another patch he could do, which was the truck stewing and make him the other killer. And I love those kind of things. Like in one of Herschel Gordon Lewis's movies from the 60s, when they were in edits, they realized, I forget which one this is, probably not Blood Feast. I don't know which one it is, but he realized that his protagonist, his hero, had worn his toupee for the first half of the film and forgot to wear it for the second half of the film, which is a big continuity error. People are going to notice that kind of stuff. And so his fix wasn't to go back and do reshoots, and they couldn't do digital stuff, of course. So his excuse was, well, we'll just rig the story such that his brother came to replace him in the middle of the movie. And I love those kind of make do tricks. That's why I love slashers when they go from the first installment to the second installment. There's so much of that going on because no one builds the first one such that there's enough story left over for a second one. So like with Friday the 13th part two, that's why Cunningham and Savini weren't part of that because they thought the story is told. But I love it when a different team has to sift through the ashes of the first installment and find the slimmest, most gossamer little story thread, pull it up and weave it into a tapestry. I just love that. I love that. And it takes so many narrative backbends to get that done. And so many I don't know, willful blindnesses on the reader's part too. I like that.
Yeah. So pros versus cons. And you touched on a lot of these, so I'm kind of, repeating your words, but the advantage of a second book in a series is you've already built the world, and you also don't have to tie all the threads in book 2. But at the same time, you have to kind of do a standalone story that has a beginning and an end, despite the fact that it leaves the door open. Because people, even before people picked up Don't Fear the Reaper, they knew there was a third installment coming. So what's the verdict? Do you, I guess I would say, if you had to pick, one of the 3 books that was the most fun to write based on, its place in the trilogy, what would you say?
Oh, that's a good question.
It's an obnoxious question. I don't know if it's good.
How dare you,
No,
sir?
I think the third one was the most fun to write. Yeah. But I like what you said. I hadn't thought of it like that. The second one leaves the door open. That's a really good way to phrase that. That cuts my 3-minute answer down to 5 words or something. That's a lot more efficient.
I'm here to help, man. So speaking of the third one, it's out in March of 2024. What can you tell people about it?
Let's see. What can I say about it? It's for all the marbles. It's Return of the King had the big battle at Minas Tirith, and this has, well, maybe another way to say it is, in My Heart is a Chainsaw, that last probably, I don't know, 25%, the last quarter of the book is pretty much the massacre in the water and watching Jaws. And I held that up as my standard for book 3. I thought, I've got to outdo that. And also I thought that was so stupid because I couldn't possibly think of anything more outrageous than that. But maybe I did. I don't know. And maybe it goes longer than 25% too,
No, I think you should. We talked about Jaws and Chuck Palahniuk in the same breath. And so maybe you should think of Shark Club.
Yeah, that'd be nice. That'd be really good. I like that. Yeah.
Shark Week.
Yeah. Or I should do like he did in Survivor. Is that in Survivor, the pages of that novel are numbered backwards. I remember I've always wanted to do that in one of my books. It'd be neat to do that in the third book, so it's counting down to the end.
You're gonna confuse the shit out of somemen.
It hasn't gone to printing yet. You could still make that happen.
They're gonna give Stephen a 1 star. The book's numbers are wrong. Stephen, is this the part where you want to say goodnight, or do you want to stick around another 15 for Erika's thing? Either.
I better get out of here, man.
Not a problem, dude.
Not a problem. Thank you so much. We've been wanting to talk to you for a long time, so it means a lot.
Yeah, no, it's great. And as lead into Erika, I think everyone should read Whitehorse. It's really cool for me to read Whitehorse because I kind of live in the area where it all happens. So it's really, really cool, man.
And you have a blurb.
Thank you, Stephen. I owe a debt to Stephen because as he, really was writing more overtly horror books, right? I was like, if he can nerd out, I can nerd out. It can be done. So I very much appreciate modeling. So even if mine is some weird version. So
thank you.
Thank you for that, sir. Have a good night.
Take it easy. Bye. Thanks for having me. Later, y'all.
Yep.
Hi, I am Erika T. Wurth, author of the Indigenous literary horror novel Whitehorse, which is out now with Flatiron Macmillan. And it is about Carrie, who is an urban Indian woman who loves heavy metal and loves horror, but despises her mother because she believes that her mother abandoned her when she was 2 days old. And when her cousin Debbie discovers an ancient bracelet of her mother's, and Carrie touches the bracelet, her mother's ghost begins to haunt Carrie, and a monster invades her dreams, and Carrie decides that she needs to find out what happened to her mother after all. And some of the inspiration for this novel is urban Indian life in Denver, Colorado. And it's also just, my love of heavy metal and horror, which was something where I went to school in Idaho Springs, people loved. And it's also a love song to old Denver.
Erika, I got to tell you, I don't get out to Target a ton, but I absolutely love that every time I do, I see copies of Whitehorse kind of on the shelf and on the, main display bays, not just kind of buried in the back. which is and it's been months too. You typically go to the big stores and the rotation rotates, as you will. So it's Whitehorse has gotten a tremendous response, and you have the paperback coming out. Is it October 1st?
That's right. They moved it
All right.
to October for spooky season, so that's super cool.
No, the timing is perfect.
It was actually really lucky about that. So the whole Target thing, the Flatiron team is really cool and proactive, but Target is a very big consumer outlet, and they want book clubby books. And my book is an Indigenous horror book, right? And you can see the ways it can be book clubby. But I have to say that that felt really lucky, because I like to think it had something to do with the book, but it was certainly Flatiron selling it a certain way. Because every time I go into Target, I get to see it, right? And that it's just such a neat thing. How many years have I been going to Target and seeing their books or their book club books? But the funny thing is, it's always 30% off now, because it's like months after the date. And I always buy them as a business expense, because if I go somewhere and I don't have any copies to sell, I can sell them, and they're actually cheaper and easier to get than from my press. So I buy them now.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So I'm always, and the cover art, the woman looks so much like me. Like every time I go through the line.
Yes, she does.
I always think they're going to. Yeah. Look, people have said that to me.
I'm glad you said that first, because if I said first.
Seriously, it's uncanny. And if you're Indigenous, like I had Indigenous women on the cover of my books before when I published with small presses and I published realism, and people are like, oh, you look like her. And I'm like, yeah, vaguely I can see it, but no, this one I'm like, no, I do. And it's weird.
I thought it was you in sunglasses. I really did.
Even the nose, it's just tremendously odd. So yeah, she and I need a DNA test.
I think that we can all probably agree that a fair bit of publishing is a mixture of hard work, and it's a lot of hard work, and luck. And the reason I brought in, the idea that, whenever I go to Target, months and months and months, I always see your book, you can, hard work and luck can get it on the shelf, but what keeps it on the shelf is readers' avid response. So I wonder, it's been a little bit since we talked about the initial release of the book. How has the response been? To my mind, it's been every time we bring it up, the person we bring it up to says, oh my God, I loved that. What's kind of been your reaction to it?
Wait, and Aaron Dries, I got to throw that in there, because I did want to get clarity after if he was friends with Erika or whatever. Not that would make a huge difference, but he barely ever spoke with you, and he randomly brought your book up. Your book's come up quite a few times.
Yeah, I really, I think for me, what happened was Stephen and I are, like, for example, very different writers, and he's such an affable, unassuming guy, even though clearly he's bright and he knows a ton. But he also just published and published and published, mainly realism with a dark theme, and eventually got to the Big Five and got to the New York Times bestseller list. And so similarly, I haven't published as much as he has, but I published in a very similar vein, and I did okay for an indie author, and I was pleased. But I think in the end, I was never really in my proper nerd home. Like, I just truly do love horror. Very different subject matter, obviously, than Stephen, but I love the paranormal. I love that darkness on a more visceral, real level, right? And so I like to think, and I also learn more about structure. Like, I really studied that, like on a nuts and bolts level. I was like, I am failing here and I need to understand it better. And once I had that toolbox, I feel like that helped as well. But yeah, it's done really well. I think it's sold on all formats, because it was like a Target Book of the Month. It was a New York Times editor's pick. I was on Good Morning America, right, which was mind blowing. And I sold somewhere in all formats, like about 50,000 books, which honestly for a debut is, when a lot of them sell 200, even with the big presses, or 2,000, I am beyond pleased. I mean, no, I didn't make a bestseller list, but I think that was just because it was like over time it built. You know what I mean? So I couldn't be happier. And I sold the next novel on what's called spec, which I never thought I'd be able to do. In other words, like first 100 pages and the concept, and Flatiron wanted it. And I finished it the other day and gave it to my agent, and who's going to give it to the editor. But yeah, it's called Room 904. So like, I feel like, I'm still very proud of White Horse. It seems like people love it. I can just randomly come across TikTok where people are talking about it. I think that's really cool. And, I can't wait to keep going with the next one.
Wow. 50,000. Yeah, that's nothing to sneeze at. Like, that is fucking crazy. That's a lot of people. Like, we take high numbers. I think it's worth just pausing on this for a second, because like nowadays we think in views of terms and likes and all that shit, and nothing really, I don't know about you guys, I'm speaking for myself, but nothing really is like impressive, because we've seen so many people get millions of views. Now, you're thinking in terms of like, I listened to, I forget what song it was on YouTube Music. It was a song that was played over 5 billion times. I'm like, holy shit. But 50,000's a fuck load. Just count to 50,000. See you in 5 weeks, or whatever it is. It's a lot.
Yeah,
it's a big number. That's a lot of books.
I mean, look, you had Karen Slaughter on the other day, and I loved so much what she had to say. She's so interesting. And she has sold like 40 million. Okay.
Yeah.
So my 50,000 is a drop in the bucket. But look, in some ways, even though I published books before, this was in many ways my debut. And I feel like for a debut, pretty damn good. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would agree with that. Yeah, absolutely. And as anyone who works with the public can attest to, people need to read more books. So 50,000 is damn good. I would also say, you drop that, whether it's 200 or 2,000, it really is the feeling of somebody choosing to spend their free time when there's Netflix and there's Hulu and there's Disney Plus and there's Amazon Prime, somebody choosing to spend their time with your book. It's a blessing every time. And for 2,000 or 50,000 people to do it, that's, outstanding. Now, when we have you on to promote the hardcover, you can get away with this is new and, let's talk about this. But now it's the paperback. Now you got to give us just a little bit more about what's next.
Oh, you mean like the next book? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So Room 904 is, in some ways I kind of tried to do a little bit in regards to what I did, but do something entirely new. Because in other words, so people who read White Horse, they're like, okay, this is more of what I like, but I didn't want them to be like, and it's exactly the same. So Room 904 is about a woman who, she was finishing her PhD in psychology, and her sister calls her. Her sister has been, in rehab. She's kind of joined this cult. The sister doesn't realize like how, deep she's in it. And her sister and her mother have always been like, oh, I see ghosts, whatever. And the main character is like, I do not, and sure, mom, sure, sister, whatever. So she's kind of drunk. She's finished her PhD. It's graduation night. And her sister calls her and she's like, I'm in the Brown Palace, which is a hotel in Denver. And if you don't get over here, I'm going to die. And she's like, you're ridiculous. I'm drunk. Come here. And she hangs the phone. And later that night, her sister appears to her. And she realizes her sister is dead. She did die. And this turns on, if you will, these paranormal abilities that are absolutely overwhelming, right? And so her academic career is destroyed. And she decides to start this paranormal business simply because she can't, her academic career is destroyed in this situation. So the Brown Palace calls her and they're like, you know what? You should come in. We have a problem and we need you to solve it. And she sees that it's her sister now has replaced this other ghost and she is haunting the Brown Palace. And they're like, yeah. And in 2 weeks, every 5 years, someone checks in and 3 weeks later, there's 3 weeks, they die. And she's like, I don't want to have anything to do with this. My sister's in here. This is just too much for me. But then her mother checks in and she's like, in 3 weeks, my mother will die if I don't solve this crime. So she decides to solve it.
That sounds cool, Sal.
I'm getting like Ring vibes almost.
Yeah, right.
Ring's one of my favorite films. That's just my thing. And I put a clock in there because I just love that idea. I just love the whole idea of a clock. So I have like the 3 weeks, I always thought that was cool.
Yeah. Time bomb countdown. Do the pages in reverse, the numbers I meant. of the actual
Why not?
pages. What if you did? Remember that
Yeah.
Seinfeld episode where they got a friend that married in India?
Oh,
and-
that's my least favorite episode.
yeah, right. They played every scene backwards, and it was like 20 minutes before, an hour before. And that shit got confusing, man.
Yep.
There's always a way to do something like Memento, right? The Memento structure. And if you remember that film, and I do admire that stuff, but I think I'm more like, okay, how to make forward motion go. That's kind of where I'm at now, but maybe something.
So,
I live in the land of go, go, go forward. Yeah.
Yeah, really I am. Yeah. I've just learned how to do that. I honestly, without traditional structure, I would just be like a mess. So
Yep.
do you want to jump into currently reading?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Erika, what are you
Yeah,
currently reading?
well, I was listening actually to Talking Scared, and Neil was talking about how he wants to do an episode where he has two people who've never read the Dark Tower series, and then just to have them read it and get the reaction. I don't know how he's going to get somebody who hasn't ever read that to read that because it's this big.
Yeah.
I was like, man, I remember loving the Dark Tower series when I was a kid. But what happened was I went to college and they like farmed it out of me, right? They were like, no, nerd, you're not allowed to like your nerd stuff if you want to be a real writer. And so I was like, okay, as stubborn as I was, that's how I ended up reading and writing mainly realism. So obviously I'm back there, and I was like, okay. And I'd reread The Gunslinger recently, which is very turgid and very I don't know if I call it postmodern bright, but it's like heavy with language, and the story is compelling. That's not what's first. And so I kind of stopped, and then Neil was saying, you know what? That's not indicative of the whole series. And I was like, yeah, that's right. So what's funny is I bought the whole thing. Sorry, my dog is scratching to get out. I bought the whole
It's fine.
thing. She's you can't buy, like, I will buy physical books. I have, obviously Don't Fear the Reaper, but I have a lot on Nook, and so I was going to buy the whole thing on Nook. You can't do it. Like, you can't buy it as a series on Nook. So I decided to buy the whole thing in paperback, and it's like a super nerd delight. And I'm just loving it because, if I'm honest with myself, I love horror and I love science fiction. I love fantasy, but it's dark fantasy that I'm really at. And so that's I'm in the middle of I think the third book right now, and I'm just
Yeah.
so
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Blaine is a pain.
He is indeed. I always think of the gun, like, I like The Gunslinger, I do, but I totally get what you're saying. It always makes me think of when I'm writing a book and I write like a first chapter or a prologue, and then I end up going back later and saying, this is me trying to figure out what the book is supposed to do, and then cutting it and incorporating the parts into what comes later. Like, that's what The Gunslinger reminds me of. It's an introduction that's not indicative of what you're getting in the rest of the series.
Yeah. The weird part for me is that I have to remind myself that he wrote it after Carrie, and Carrie is nothing like it, right? It's very like what people call window pane language. It's story forward. Whereas The Gunslinger is, I guess, his moment where he's like, let's go back to college and be fancy. But what's funny is he went back and said, right, I want to rewrite that thing a little bit so it's not so turgid. But obviously he gave up at a certain point because he was like, that's just what it is. It's what it was.
Yep.
But yeah, I'd forgotten some of my most distinct memories as a child are sitting there in my room reading The Dark Tower. So that whole series. And I literally have memory,
I will be curious upon revisit, although you can certainly answer me now. My favorite in the series is Wizard and Glass, and I feel like that generally tends to be people's either favorite or least favorite. From your memory, where do you come in on Wizard and Glass?
Well, I don't remember. I remember like rereading the second one. I'm like, okay, I remember that. I remember that scene. I remember the scene. And I'm reading the third one, and I don't remember any of it, really. So Wizard of Glass is obviously the big boy. So we'll see. I don't even remember what I remember. That's the interesting part about it.
I'm going to jump in next. I am about halfway through Becoming the Boogeyman by Richard Chismar. It's the follow-up to Chasing the Boogeyman, which he put out maybe 2 years ago. And it's this interesting mix of fiction and true crime where he writes himself into the narrative. Kind of, sorry, Erika, if there's spoilers here, but you did read the book, the Dark Tower series at some point, but where King writes himself into the narrative. Chismar does that here. And I remember loving the first one. It's been a couple of years since I read it, Chasing the Boogeyman, but it was just so original. Nobody else was really doing anything like that, where it was, we know it's fiction, but it just reads like this true crime book. There's photos in it. There's everything that you would have in a true crime book. And this one reads like an absolute sequel, like just picks up where the last one left off, talks about, the first book, and the first book being, made into a hypothetical movie. It's really cool, and I'm super excited to talk to Rich about that. Couple that I have not started yet, but I'm about to jump into: The Reformatory by Tananarive Dew, who we will be talking to in early October, and Not Forever But For Now by Chuck Palahniuk, who we will also be talking to in early October. Patrick, I'm going to throw it to you.
I'm in between books. I'm about to start Becoming the Boogeyman, so I don't have anything interesting to add on that end. So let's go.
I'm the Boogeyman.
Yeah, check out the first one, and if it strikes your fancy, then absolutely be on the lookout for the second one, which I believe comes out October 10th. Because it really does read as, hey, if you liked the first one, the second one is absolutely going to be up your alley.
Yeah. This looks. It definitely. I like a little bit of postmodern, right? If it's just too much, then I'm like, that's just, to me, if something's really overtly that way, it's better in the short form because it's like a magic trick.
Yeah.
And in the end, you're performing a little magic trick. But if you're just kind of doing it again and again, like it takes the magic out of it. So I kind of feel that way about postmodernism. But if it's got like just one little fun trick, I'm in,
Yeah, and the first one was really original, and this one's not going to break the mold because we've seen it before, but it's almost kind of like, hey, you guys dug the first one, like, let's just keep the ride going. And it's funny because even though I think they came out maybe 6 months, 8 months apart, but Daniel Krause's The Ghost That Ate Us kind of did the same thing, and it was like, even though they came out, not at the same time, they were definitely being composed at the same time, so it wasn't like a ripoff. But they had that kind of, this is fiction, but it's going to read like this is something that really happened. Krause's book was about the case of a poltergeist that inhabited a fast food restaurant. Again, pictures, news articles, all kinds of real life things put into fiction that drew you in and just kind of assisted the narrative as you went along.
I do have in room 904, I have a bunch of like rewritten eBay, and there's you can buy like ghost hunting material. Like I rewrote a bunch of that and put like that throughout. So I suppose that's sort of postmodern-y.
I love those sprinkles, if you like have the narrative and just the occasional interruption by news articles or, online spreadsheets, whatever it is,
Yep, me too.
Erika, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I thank you for having me. I appreciate you letting me like do a tail end on Steven's, show. So
Sure.
I very appreciate it.
Yeah. That worked out in so many. Of course, we wish we had Candace here, but it worked out in so many levels. So that's really cool. So my final thoughts are thank you for being here. Thank you to Steven. Brennan.
Thank you to Steven, even though he's not here to hear it. Absolutely a blast. I wish we had got him on sooner, but better late than never. Erika, thank you for coming, because we contacted you like 6 hours ago and said, would you like to guest host? And you made time for us on your Monday night. And yeah, that's what I've got.
All right.
Yeah, I loved it. Stephen is always an easy guy to talk to because the difference is we kind of have the same like realm in which we circle. And I saw him just yesterday at the Boulder bookstore. So, and I was really thankful he was there because it was this sort of big kind of loose event. And I was like, oh, Jesus Christ, I hope Stephen's here because I'll know somebody. And he was.
That's awesome. Next episode is 210, Hot Iron Cold Blood. Me and Brandon are going to be the two panelists. Candace and Robert Otone are going to take over as hosts. So that's new. I don't know how they're going to run the show. That's part of the fun. We're going to be joined by Brianna Morgan, Drew Huff, and Ronald Kelly. Did I get that right, Brian?
I'm honestly not sure.
Okay, nailed it.
Let's just say yes.
As always, you have many choices in podcasts. Don't forget to buy Don't Fear the Reaper and White Horse in paperback. Oh, that's not the line. Thanks for choosing us and those books.